All right, so in this lesson 205, we're going to go ahead and get ourselves ready for the lesson. We're going to create our database both on WAMP and on WAMP on our local machine, and also on our hosting as well. So what we want to open before we get started is go ahead and get WAMP fired up. If you're not using WAMP, dismiss the WAMP sections. It's a good idea though to use it and learn how to use it. And what you'll need open is first, of course, your your site that you'll be posting to and submitting with, your local files, your local site that you're working on. Here's 204 that we went on, and we're going to make a copy of 204 and start off with 205. Go ahead and get the Agabus hosting ready to be logged into. Your local phpMyAdmin, so we can create the database right on local, and then also pull up in the homework instruction, the assignment part, so that you can go into the change log and access the code that we need to get to. So with that said, let's go ahead and let's get started. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our database. And we're going to use our change log and come in and grab our SQL right out of there. And what this is basically doing, we'll talk through it as soon as I put it in to the first database, but I'm going to go ahead and grab that section, copy it, and I'm going to start off with my local database. When you go into phpMyAdmin on your local and you're at the main screen, you see that you have all your databases listed over to the left, and the server and server information. And where we want to put that SQL is right here in this SQL box. We want to go ahead and paste it in there. And what it's doing is basically creating a database if it does not exist. And we're going to do steps so that any database changes we have, we can capture in steps. It's going to try to create this database. When it does, it's going to look for a user table. It's going to drop it if it exists. This is just good, clean starting point. And then it's going to create the table if it doesn't exist, which it won't after it's dropped. So once our table is created, we're going to come down and we're going to insert into the users table the ID, the student username, first name, last name, hashed password, and then our dates, our creation and modification dates. So we have this all pasted in here. We can go ahead and click go. And what you should have is all greens, that it created the database. And if you come over here on the left and reload, you should see it come up. And there it is. If you got errors, there's a good chance you actually clicked inside a database. Make sure that all you have up here is your server. Make sure it doesn't have some type of database. But now that we've created it, there's our database. There we are. Step 205. We can see our table here, our user table. If we click on it, we can see our row that we inserted into it. And we are good there. So that is how we create our database on our local host. And we'll do pretty much the same thing out at our Agabus hosting. So let's go log into our Agabus hosting. Let's go to databases, MySQL databases. And in here, all databases are named with your username, your Agabus hosting username, underscore, and then whatever prefix you want to put onto it. The way that I recommend you do it is basically use the same database over and over again for what we're doing for the PHP steps. So we'll go ahead and we'll create a new database. And for this one, if I were you, I would call it PHP app. I think it might let you do that. And then rack pass as the password. Now, some of you might get this. It'll say you've exceeded the 16 characters because your username is so long. Kind of frustrating. So you can be creative and come up with a name. For me, I'm going to go ahead and just create a database because I have unlimited databases, and I'm going to call it 205. And I'm Brian Savage underscore 205 with the password rackpass, and I'm going to go ahead and add it in there. So whatever you named your database, just make sure you take note of that. Make sure that you use the password rackpass to keep it easy and simple. And once it's created, it'll show up in this list, and we can go into phpMyAdmin by clicking on that, and this looks very similar to where we were before. The difference here is that we're not going to have to create a database. We already did create it through Egibus hosting. So if we click on it over here on the left, our database, we go into our SQL structure, and we can paste in the same code that we used, except in this case we're inside the database now. You can see here's the server and we're inside the database, and what we can do is go ahead and get rid of the SQL to create a database and just go after the table and the insert. And if we hit go, looks like we did good. We got our results. We got our user. Actually, if we refresh over here, we'll see we got our user table. Inside our user table, we have the insert. So that's creating our databases. So now we have a database created on our host, on our web host, and we have a database created in our local WAMP or MAMP if you're on Mac. And we're ready to go ahead and write some code to connect to that. Okay, so now that we have our database created, we want to go ahead and connect to it, and we can do that by going into our Dreamweaver, and we're going to go into our 204 folder, which makes sure that you have it synchronized and available locally and from your remote, and that you have the exact same files. So I'm actually pulling down and making sure you don't need this changes folder. I use that for communicating to you the changes and things of that nature. But what we are doing with the 204 folder is we're bringing that down. And now that I have it all down, I'm going to go ahead and highlight it and hit Control D and make a copy of it and rename it to 205. Before I do anything else, I'm going to go, remember, don't update. Before anything else, I'm going to go out to my local host, and I'm going to refresh, and you can see here I don't see it. I'm going to refresh. There's my 205 folder. I'm going to hop in there and just make sure that everything looks like it should and it's working, so I don't end up working on errors that really don't exist. It can be real challenging. I'm going to pull up one of the pages that we created in 204 during our clean time. We look good there. So the one thing I want to do right away is go ahead and take care of the number. Before anything else, I think I'm going to refresh my local files. There we go, just so my 205 sits up there nicer. And I'm going to open up my config. And in my config, of course, I'm going to change that to 205. I'm going to hit save. Now, when I save, it automatically pushes to the server. I did that through a setting. If you go into your site and you go into server and you double click on your server, under the advanced, you can say automatically upload files when save. It's an efficiency thing. It helps you out as you're making changes. It's nice to be able to just have them push automatically up without doing anything. I know everything's working, so I'm going to highlight my 205 folder and I'm going to push it to my web host. And while I'm doing that, I'll come over and just check and make sure that the change came through for 205 there. I see it changed up here. I'm good there. So now I'm going to go out to my web server and take a look, and there my 205 folder popped up. I'm going to hop in there. It's not done pushing up yet. So I can hop in there and just keep refreshing, waiting for it. I can see in my Dreamweaver the wheels spinning, pushing everything up. And I'm being impatient. I see it pushing up the JS and things like that right now. And there we have it. You can see everything looks good. Everything's working out the way that we want it to. Awesome. So now we're ready to go ahead and do a connection to our database. If we look at our homework, we can take a look and we can see we don't need our SQL anymore. That was our database changes. If we come up here, the only file that we're changing in this lesson, because we're just taking small steps as we go along, the only file that we're changing in this lesson is the config. And what I'm going to do is basically copy what I have in here. I'll just do a select all, and then I'm going to paste it in and discuss it with you. So I'll do a select all and paste it. Whoops, that didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. I was still inside of the... Let's try that again. And there we go. Awesome. So nothing has changed up top here. We're still getting our data, our JSON data and things of that nature. But as we come down, what's new is the code that we see right here. And let's just talk about this code block real quick. When you're working both locally and remotely, it's nice to just take the time and write the code correctly so that you're in a position that if the config file ends up getting pushed to the server, or you don't want to worry about pushing it to the server because you're still developing and will be adding things in the config file, what's really great to do is to use this global variable called server. And it's a server variable, and inside of this variable, as you can see in the homework, I pointed out some reading for you. There's some things in there. But the one variable that we're going to use is server name. And what that does, it returns the name, basically the domain name of the top. And more importantly, what we're doing is we're looking for it and saying, hey, if we are on localhost, use these server credentials, this information, to connect to our database server. If not, use this information to connect to the database server. What's really nice about that is now we don't have to worry about pushing up and pulling down and things of that nature. We are able to just move along and keep letting our config file evolve and not worry about it at all. When we come down and we look here in our config file, we create the link object, which is basically connecting to our server, our SQL server, which is using these variables that we defined up there, down here. And it's just creating that connection and opening it up so that we're able to connect to the database server and make calls. What we can do in here for a test, because we're not really using it, is you can put down here, if you would like, a statement, whatever you would like. You could put down here something to reflect that you connected to the database. So for an example, we can just put echo connection good, just so you have some feedback and you can see what's going on. We'll have to do a view source to really see that. But if I go ahead and I hit save, and remember, just to review real quick, localhost, we use the username root, and this is the database that we created on the localhost. If we get it, if we're not on localhost, we're out at our web server. Well, ironically, if we're sitting on our web server, from that perspective, we're still connecting to our local host because we're local to our web server. Our code is local to the web server. But we're using the username and the database name and the password that we supplied out there, that we created out there. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Come out. Take a look at my local, see if it blows up at all. It didn't blow up at all. If I right click and I view page source, I can see up here before the doc type, because the declaration, because our config comes in before our header, I can see connection good showed up. So now what I can do as well is go back, and for those of you who aren't doing autosave, highlight your config file, come out here. I'm on my web server now, taking a look. Doing a refresh. Got a good refresh. Let's do a view page source and we can see connection good. So I know in both places I'm connecting to my web servers. My database is connected. I'm going to just clean this up real quick and get rid of this else statement. I don't really want it there. It was just really just a good way to show you how to see that you've connected and that we are good to go. So that takes care of this lesson 205, connecting to the database, and 206 will actually use the connection to pull some information.